juncture, the Secretary General's report is not just timely, it is essential. It serves as a foundational document that invites us to rethink the relationship between security, disarmament, and development. It confronts a stark reality. Rising global military expenditures are not delivering peace and will not achieve sustainable peace. Instead, they undermine our shared vision for a just, sustainable, and equitable future. The challenge before us is not to merely reverse the trend of escalating military spending and shrinking development finance, but to recommit to multilateralism and diplomacy. We must integrate peace and development agendas and recalibrate global financial priorities. And this report urges member states to act with foresight and resolve. Consider this. The world's wealthiest countries spend 30 times more on their militaries than rebalancing global on climate finance for the world's most vulnerable nations. And rebalancing global priorities is not optional, it is an imperative for our survival. Military expenditure, when rooted in legitimate security concerns, can help restore order and lay the groundwork for peace, of course. But it must not crowd out resources for health, education, climate action, gender equality. It must be weighed strategically alongside other tools for security, confidence-building measures, arms control dialogue, and disarmament diplomacy. True security is not built on armaments alone. It is built when resources prioritize people over weapons, prevention over reaction, and cooperation over arms race. We face a choice, continuing down a path of escalating militarization that sidelines development and diplomacy, or take a new path towards shared security and prosperity. The call to action is clear. Recommit to multilateralism. Invest in diplomacy and preventative efforts to de-escalate tensions, manage conflict, and restore trust. Global and regional confidence-building measures must be prioritized to address the underlying drivers of rising military expenditure. Disarmament instruments that protect civilians must be safeguarded. Military spending should be at the heart of disarmament discussions and scrutinized through the lens of human impact. Civil society, including youth, academia, and local communities, have a vital role to play. Ultimately, arms control is about people. We need a new vision of security, human-centered and rooted in the UN Charter. A vision that safeguards people, not just borders, and prioritizes institutions, equity, and planetary sustainability. Let this report spark a new conversation, one that challenges the status quo and inspires bold, transformative change. I thank you very much for your attention and interest in this important report, and I hand over to my good friend and colleague, Hao Lian Xu.
Thank you. Please, Hao Lian. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, thank you to the Secretary General for leading this important initiative. And thank you to the High Representative for Disarmament Affairs for facilitating the production of this report. We at the NDP, and especially our colleagues at our Human Development Report Office, are honored to be part of the effort to produce this report. As a representative of the UN development system, I have two quick points to make. First, when it comes to maintaining international peace and security, development is indispensable. development, peace and security, and human rights are interlinked and mutually reinforcing. When people live healthy, educated, and fulfilling lives in dignity, their societies are often more peaceful. And vice versa, societies with high poverty rates and underdevelopment often experience insecurity and violent conflicts. Investing in development is investing in peace, stability, and prosperity. My second point, investments into security and investments into development are not a zero-sum game, both domestically and internationally. The nature and the relative scale of development and security investments matter. As the new report from the Secretary General states, military spending can be necessary to restore public safety in contexts of acute violence and state fragility. But the recent surge in military spending is not predominantly directed at addressing these issues and tends to come at the expense of people's security worldwide, particularly in developing countries. Let me put the costs into perspective, as Secretary General cited some examples earlier. Military spending for 2024 was 13 times more than the official development assistance provided by OECD DAC countries, right, in 2024. Right? And a US study has found that a $1 billion investment in military expenditure, right, can generate over 11,000 jobs. Right? But if this $1 billion is invested in clean energy, it can generate 17,000 jobs. And if this is invested in education, the number soars to 27,000 jobs. Right? And also, most glaringly, is how much developing countries are paying to service their debt in 2024. It's $1.17 trillion. Right? And it's 60% of the world spends on military expenditure in 2024. Right? So the point is that unsustainable debt burdens, right, can crowd out the investments that drive lasting peace and security. These are investments in education, healthcare, social protection, employment, climate actions, right, mitigations and adaptations. Right? So in conclusion, okay, as the report emphasizes, there is no sustainable peace without sustainable development. UNDP's Human Development Index shows that the pace of progress has slowed dramatically over the last 2 years. For the last 2 years, the Global Human Development Index grown by 0.001 point for 2 years in a row. Right? So that means, if we don't invest in development sufficiently and urgently, the human growth that we have achieved over the last few decades will possibly decline. Right? So what happens, from here, right, is up to us. Right? So we joined the Secretary General, the High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, and other leaders in calling for a shift towards a people-centered and multidimensional approach to security. And we support building a bright future for all by prioritizing diplomacy, right, international cooperation, and sustainable development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hao Liang. Edie?
Thank you both very much for doing this briefing on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association. My name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. In our very divided world with major wars in Gaza, Ukraine, and Sudan, to name just a few, how can the United Nations convince countries, especially those that are major military powers, to reduce their military spending and spend much more on improving the lives of the world's people?
Izumi, do you want to start? Or?
Thank you very much for that question. I think the answer is that there is no one single silver bullet. It's not like this is what the UN will do and then everything will start moving. As I said, we very much hope that this report will be a beginning of a very serious conversation at the member states level, but also, if you will, public at large, where people will take this issue much more seriously. I hope you will have an opportunity to read through the report. It, of course, recognizes the legitimate security concerns that, as you say, the world is really divided, the tensions rising, etc. But our finding is that military alone is not going to produce security in a sustainable manner. I think the human society has gone through this in the past history, where various measures for security, and that I include as a disarmament person, confidence building measures, transparency, dialogues, disarmament, arms control, all these are security instruments. They were created by member states, by many experts, as security instruments to complement the military ways. So what we are calling for is a reset, rethink of how security can be more sustainably achieved. And I hope that this report, which is the Secretary General's report, requested by member states in the Pact for the Future last year, this will be the beginning of such a serious conversation for us to be able to rethink, both at the member states level, but also public at large, both at the national level and at the global level.
Thank you. Sorry, Sherwin, then Yvonne.
Thank you to you both for this briefing. I wonder if you could perhaps address the elephant in the room. Just as you walked in here, right, the scenario is that you're here to launch a report to highlight the disparities between military spending and the lack of investment in social development, just as Israel launches a strike against a sovereign member state of these United Nations. How do you therefore ensure that your messaging in this report is not undercut by the breaking news of the day, which happens to be an almost daily occurrence these days?
I count on you, members of the media, to make sure that what is underlining factors driving, this is a global report, it's not about just one region or one country or one group of countries, but we wanted to make sure that in-depth analysis of what is going on in different parts of the world, how that is actually driving the global trends of soaring military expenditure. And I count on members of the media to make sure that those issues will also be out there for people to be able to think and discuss.
Besides counting on just the media, what are the responsibilities of member states?
I mean, we have actually recommended concrete action points in the report. We are basically talking about some action points where security is considered much more broadly, multidimensionally, not just as military security. When it comes to military budget making, we are calling for more transparent budget making processes, etc., accountability in the budget making processes. So making some concrete proposals, which we very much hope will be taken seriously. And I think the expert community, civil society, academia, we have actually worked together with many of those. We had a call for papers, suggestions. It was not just a little UN departments with a big UNDP, of course, putting together this report, but we tried to engage various stakeholders around the world to submit their expertise and perspectives. So I hope that these will continue. Rest assured that we are going into the high-level week, and we will be organizing some panel discussions, side events, etc., to make sure that this will also, if you will, land in member states' discussions.
Yvonne Abdelhamid and Pam. Sorry, Holly, did you have? Sorry, I apologize.
I
Holly,
can
please.
speak at some point. Maybe I can. Maybe I can just address a couple of points that was raised. First, I think multilateralism works. Okay, it's very important, right? And multilateral development cooperation produces results. Okay, and produce results that the military expenditure cannot produce. Right? I'll give you some examples very quickly. Right, we're all aware of the fight against HIV/AIDS, right? Since early 2000s, international community decided to act together. And over the last 20 plus years, the Global Fund, right, for HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria raised more than $60 billion with international action. It saved 65 million lives. Right? We know the story about multilateral action to save the ozone layer. Right? Again, multilateral action. Right? Billions of dollars of expenditure. Right? We removed 99% of the ozone depleting substance from the production. The response to COVID-19 was a collective effort. Right? The UN led the international response, right? From strategy, from analysis to strategy to vaccine, right? Development and distribution. So multilateral action works. In Iraq, for example, right, the stabilization program with multiple donor support that UNDP supported, right, built more than 3,500, 600 infrastructure projects, public buildings, schools, hospitals, whatever. Moved 5 million people back to their homes. Right? So that directly contributes to peace and stability. Right? So all the examples I cited, right, are the results of multilateral action. Right? And the list goes on. Right? The point of this report is that increasing military expenditure alone, in particular, right, is not going to provide the kind of peace and stability we need for this world. Right? And it is crowding out the resources that are critically needed for sustainable development. That is addressing the root causes of instability in many countries. Right? So I will just stop here for now. Right? Okay.
Thank you, Halion, and apologies for not giving you the floor earlier. Yvonne Abdelhamid, then Pam.
Hi. Thank you very much for this briefing. Yvonne Murray, RTE News, Ireland. As you know, Russia, supported by China and others, is waging a war on European soil. Washington has told Europe it needs to step up and look after its own security. In this context, is your message to European countries not to increase military spending? Thank you.
As I mentioned already, this is a report about the global trends. We're not actually looking at one region or one particular country. Report also recognizes legitimate security concerns. What we are saying is that, as I also mentioned in my initial remarks, military expenditure has to be also weighed strategically together with other means for security, such as diplomacy, confidence building, arms control dialogues. So we're not actually targeting one country or one region. We are suggesting that there is a way to secure the security concerns. I mean, we are able to address the security concerns more strategically, not just by increasing military expenditures. So I hope you will be able to actually look at those measures that we are suggesting in the report. But the report acknowledges that there is definitely legitimate security concerns, not just in one country, one region, but around the world.
Yeah, clearly, the UN is doing a lot to support Ukraine, right? And both in the areas of humanitarian assistance, significant efforts, right, with the government, but also helping the government of Ukraine to respond to the damages that have been caused by the war. The UN, for example, is working again with the major developed countries, right, to support the restoration of energy infrastructure, for example, significantly, right, to provide the necessary energy that people need for their everyday life, for enterprises to operate. We are supporting government, again, with a significant effort to restore public buildings, housings, right, housing structures, and also demining efforts, significant demining to release land that is contaminated by unexploded ordnance for productive uses. We're also undertaking significant effort to support the government, to support veterans, right, to rehabilitation veterans, but also business opportunities for veterans to have skills, right, to have livelihoods, and so forth. So, so I think the UN is working with our, membership of the UN in a very significant way. Right? The report does make reference to military expenditure, increase of military expenditure by both the Russian Federation and the Ukraine as a result of this war. But if you look at the UN's role, right, you need to look at what the UN can do and the UN cannot do, right? But the UN certainly, Secretary General has announced, Stefan has repeated many times, the UN's principle, right, on the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and so forth, right, of the Ukraine. So this is very clear. UN position is very clear. Right, thank you.
Thank you. Abdelhamid and Pam.
Thank you. Thank you both for the press conference. My name is Abdelhamid Sayam from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. First, I want to ask you if you foresee in the near future that AI could become more sovereign and it's hard to control arms productions, arms technology, arms trade. How do you see the near future of that? And the second, I wish you put your finger on the wound and say this is the problem. That's where which is who's producing the arms, who's selling, who's benefiting from that? Why you don't say it clearly? Is it the developing nations or the developed nations who creating the smart bombs and the phantom fighting jets and the aircraft carriers? Why you don't be more direct to say this is the problem? We should address it when at a time when a superpower changing the name of Defense Department to War Department. Thank you.
Please.
I certainly hope AI would not become sovereign. I would actually point out that the member states collectively agreed to take major steps, 2 steps. One is the establishment of the scientific panel on AI, and then start a global dialogue on AI governance. The person who facilitated that is in this room. So I think there is a collective awareness that we would not be used by AI, but AI will have to serve or continue to serve the benefit and the interest of human beings. So definitely I do hope that we would not see a day where AI will become a sovereign entity. If you actually look at the report, there is a part that talks about military-industrial complex. And it's called, it has an analysis of how those big military industry is impacting the whole issue of military expenditure by various capabilities, including lobbying and influence in the political processes. And then we are calling for more transparency, accountable behaviors, the conduct of those industry as well. So we are actually addressing those, if you will, private and economic interests that is deeply entrenched in this whole issue. So I invite you to take a look at that.
Okay. Just checking. Pam?
Thank you to the briefers. This is Pamela Falk from U.S. News and World Report. This report is very comprehensive on global military arms increases. but we're watching in real time a proliferation of nuclear weapons by major world powers, China, U.S., Russia, and the perhaps stopping or allowing to stop some of the treaties. The New START treaty is up for renewal, maybe or maybe not to be renewed. Do you think there's a global nuclear arms race going on with what you've read? I mean, with your full report and all that you've looked at? Thank you.
I guess this question is for me. Indeed, I mean, this is a major issue for the international community. Whether there is a nuclear arms race taking place, for a while we have already been saying that there has been qualitative nuclear arms race, meaning that all nuclear weapon states have been investing huge amounts of money to modernize their nuclear arsenals. And soon, or we might already be in a quantitative nuclear arms race starting. So definitely concern is there. I'm very much concerned about that. Many member states are really concerned about that. There is also the rhetoric, or in our view, misperception that nuclear weapons actually gives the ultimate security, which is also causing yet another additional proliferation drivers, if you will. So we need to definitely put a stop to that. We need to reverse the trends, and we will have actually a very important opportunity coming up next year. One is the review conference of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty that is taking place from April to May next year. We are already in the preparation phase. We're actively working with states parties under the leadership of the presidency, which is Vietnam. And also next year, later in next year, there is the first review conference of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. So next year we will have very important landmark opportunities for member states to put a stop to this potential or emerging nuclear arms race.
And do you not see it as existential to the international system? I mean, that something has to be done before next year?
Well, I mean, we are already working on, absolutely, it is existential. Nuclear weapons, along with a few other existential threats, I think many people acknowledge that when it comes to nuclear weapons, the issues are quite existential. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, I see no other questions. Thank you very much to Izumi and Hao-Leong, and thanks to all of you for coming here on a busy day. I will not be, the PGA will speak around noon, so I will not trample on the PGA's turf.